And that's what David had been facing. He'd been facing it. He was getting depressed because of all these things that are happening. You see a progression of that when Nabal, you remember in Nabal's situation, when Nabal says, I'm not giving you anything, what was his first response? Boy, it was anger. Remember that? Hey, get your sword. Everybody line up. We're going to go and we're going to kill him and kill all of his boys, and we're going to kill everything. We have had it with him. That was something that David had never really responded or reacted to before. We saw that last week. Well, why did that happen? Because when he's fearful and when he's angry and when all of that stuff is happening in his heart and there doesn't seem to be any resolution to that in his life, and those things are taking place, and all of a sudden he begins to react ways that he hasn't reacted before. And one of those things was against Nabal, that he would do that. The other thing was running from the fight or running from the purpose. He's always been running to something, but now he says, I'm giving up the fight. I'm giving up. I'm tired of fighting with Saul. I'm leaving here. I'm going to the Philistines. I'm going to be over there. And if I get over there, then Saul will leave me alone. I'm tired of this battle. I'm tired of this fight. And all of those progressions is because he's depressed in his spirit. He's depressed in his spirit. Those are reasons for depression. Now, understand this. You're going to have some of the same reasons to be depressed. Let me just assure you of one thing. As mighty an enemy as Saul was, and as relentless as he was to fight against David, you've got one more relentless. His name is Satan. Did you know that? His name is Satan. And he's going to fight you every day. The first day you don't think he's going to fight you, and the first day you don't put your armor on, you'll find out he shows up that day. You understand? He's going to fight you. He makes Saul look weak. And he's going to fight you, and he's going to battle you every day, and you've got to be prepared. Because if you do not get prepared for that, and you're not prepared for that, he's going to find that place. And you know what? He has people who work for him too, who will cooperate with him, and they'll betray you, and they'll hurt your feelings, and they'll be used as instruments of those things. And you in your life, you're going to have responsibilities you've got to fulfill and things that you don't know how you're going to measure up to, and all those things that weigh in on you in your life. Those things are going to happen to you, and just as David experienced depression, you can too. And if you watch yourself, sometimes those things will become active in your life. Maybe there's anger that, man, you really never been that angry a person, but all of a sudden you explode and you're volcanic, and you do that. And maybe the next thing is, as you're progressing and digressing in that walk or that journey, the next thing is you just want to retire, and you want to quit, and you want to hide, and you don't want to take on any responsibilities. I'm not taking on one more responsibility. I'm not being on anything. I'm going to do nothing but sit and take care of myself. I'm going to just do that. I'm getting out of the fight. I'm getting out of the game. I'm just going to do that. You know what those are results of? Or you know what that is a picture of? You know, it's a progression towards? It's depression. Reactions that aren't normally there, and desire to leave the fight and get out of the battle. Those are all depression. And listen to me. You will have reason for it. You'll have reason for it. The old enemy is going to make sure you have reasons for it. But it's not where you want to go. It's not where God would have you. And I want to warn you about something. I want to warn you about the results. You need to be real careful about the results of this move in depression, this move to get out of the battle, this move to get out of the game. Be very careful, because the results are not what you're going to want eventually. Now, the first result seems like it's pretty good. You know what the first result is? David says, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to the land of the Philistines, and I'm going to leave Saul alone, and I want him to leave me alone. Look what it says in verse 4. Now, it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, so he no longer searched for him. That looks like a good result, doesn't it? Hey, I tell you what, the first thing, when I decided I'm leaving to go and live with the Philistines, when I get over there, Saul leaves me alone. That looks good, but it's not good. It's not good. It seems like a sense of relief. I'm here to tell you, if you're on the battle line and you're in the forefront of doing things in the kingdom of God, and you're trying to walk with Jesus and make a difference in the world, and you get depressed and you get down and you want to quit and you want to leave and you resign everything and you back up, the first feeling you're going to have when you back up, you're going to have a sense of relief. Wow. Whew, I feel better about that. I tell you what, I got more peace about that. I feel better than I felt in a long time. But that's not the right result, because that's not the end of the story. Do you know why David feels better? Because he left the battle. You know why David feels better? Because he got out of the game. You leave the battlefront, and there is a sense of relief. But let me tell you about leaving the battlefront. When you leave the battlefront, there's only one direction to go when you leave the battlefront, and that's backwards. And when you go backwards, that's called retreating. And whenever you retreat, it seems peaceful for a moment. But let me assure you this, the enemy's not going to hold that line. The enemy's going to advance his line. And wherever you are, the battle will finally come to you. The only thing about it is when the battle finally comes to you and catches up to you, you've lost a lot of ground. You lost a lot of ground. So the first reaction is it seems okay, it seems good, but it's not good. I'll never forget talking to a young man. He was in college. And whenever I was talking to him about his spiritual life because he had backslidden. And whenever I talked to him about his life, this is what he told me. He said, you know, Mack, he says, every time that I'm trying to serve God, he says, things just seem like they go wrong for me. Things are harder, they're more difficult, it's trying. But you know, whenever I just kind of backslide and whenever I kind of do the things that I want to do and I'm not so caught up on serving God, things seem like they go a whole lot better. Seem like it's a whole lot easier. And I sat there in that restaurant talking to him, and I understood what he was saying. But I looked at him and I said, but you got to remember this. Every time that you back up, you leave the battlefront, and every time you back up, you lose. You're losing. You're losing. You're losing. I'll tell you the end result of that young man. He took his own life. He took his own life as a believer, as a child of God. No doubt he was saved. But you know what? Instead of staying on the battle line, instead of staying in the game, instead of letting God empower him, he just kept backing up and backing up and backing up and backing up till there was no place else to back. At least he thought. Be careful, lest when you get depressed, you want to get out of the game. You want to go to the land of the Philistines. You want to make your home over there so Satan will leave you alone, so he won't bring the battle to you. Be careful. First result seems like it's good, but the end result is not. Or see, the end result is this. Notice what happens to him. When he gets over there and he talks to Achish, he says, listen, I can't live in the city you live in, so I want you to give me a place to live. And this is what Achish says. Notice he says, okay, I'm going to give you the land of Ziklag. Ziklag. You can live there. Now, I don't know if you've ever studied that land of Ziklag. Let me tell you about it. You can study it when you get home. Ziklag is at the southern part of Judah. Very southern part. That land was given, when God gave the promised land, that land was given to the children of Israel, especially to Joshua. It was part of Joshua's land. So that means in the mind of God and the economy of God, this land was the people of God's. It was God's land. But what had happened is the Philistines had overrun that land and had taken charge of it. Now, they never possessed it. They never lived there, but they were just in charge of it. Simeon, some of Simeon's tribe, eventually went down and they lived in Ziklag. And the only way they lived there is they lived there and cohabited with the Philistines and paid homage to the Philistines. And the Philistines had the power over it, even though the people of God were living there. And that's the place where Achish said David could go. You understand the importance of that? You can live in a land that's supposed to be, it is God's, but it's being possessed and empowered by the enemy. It's being controlled by the enemy, but we'll let you live there. Now, you know what is happening in regard to that? You know what the picture of? It's the picture that in your life, if you are going to live by depression, you're going to let depression dominate you, you're going to let your decisions be on that, based on those things, and what's going to happen in your life is going to be this. Listen to me now. You're going to be in a place that's supposed to be controlled by God, but the old enemy has control over it. He has power over it. And He's the one you have to pay homage to. He's the one that you have to submit to in order to live in peace there. And you're living in compromise in a place where it's supposed to be God's. Compromising position in your life, even though it's supposed to be God's. Two other things I want to show you. Whenever he lived in Ziklag, whenever he would make that move to the back, he begins to have characteristics in his life he had never had before. David was a righteous, godly man. Loved the Lord, served the Lord. But hold on. Look, two things happened in his life. He had to provide food for his people, so that meant he had to go and raid other people's land. He went and he killed the Philistines, and he took their food. That's one thing. But he had to turn around and murder everyone, men, women, and children, in order to protect his lie, in order to protect what he was doing. He had never done that in his life before, never murdered somebody unjustly before. But that caused him to do that because he had to protect his name and his position. And then whenever Achish asked him, where you been? He didn't say, well, I went and killed a bunch of Philistines. That wouldn't have made him very happy. So what he had to do, he had to say, I went and killed a bunch of the people of the Jews. I went to Judah and made a raid. And he lied. Do you see what's happened in his life? He's a murdering liar. A man who's been described as a man after God's own heart. How could he be a murdering liar? Because whenever depression takes over and you get out of the battle and you live in Ziklag, you're going to have characteristics in your life that you are not even going to recognize. They're going to be characteristics. You do not even know who that person is. Because you let depression cause you to make decisions that are going to bring about end result of sin. Now, I want to very quickly get to the remedy because that's the most important part of all. How do you get well? How do you get back? Well, you have to go back to verse 1 of chapter 27, and it tells you what causes it to start with. I don't know if you noticed, it says this, then David said to himself. You need to circle those words. Then David said to himself. You know what David's problem was and why he got depressed and why all these things began to happen in his life? Because David was talking to himself instead of talking to God. Before this time, David always inquired of God. He was always asking God, God, what should I be doing? God, what direction should I take? He had always asked God. And now, in this situation, and also in that situation we talked about last week with Nabal, in both of those situations when he encountered something, it says he talked to himself. Let me tell you something. When you're talking to yourself, you're usually giving bad advice. You're going to usually give bad advice when you're talking to yourself. And that's what he did. He talked to himself, and in talking to himself, he decided what he was going to do. And the only way that he ever gets better, you need to mark in 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 8, he's going to encounter something in chapter 30 that's going to cause him to go once again and to inquire of God. Now, the remedy for us getting out of depression, the remedy for us to change the results of our lives and that depression is this. We need to seek God, not us. If you're trying to find that strength in yourself, if you're trying to counsel yourself, if you're trying to find the answers in yourself, that is not going to happen. You're not going to find anything. It's not going to help you at all. I'm here to tell you, you're going to have to be like David. You're going to have to inquire of God. Go back and ask God. Second thing, you've got to remember the promises. Listen to what he said in verse 1. Now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than to escape. Hold on a second. Is that true? That's not true. What did God promise David from the time that he anointed him as a little boy? What did he promise him? You're going to be king. You're going to be king. I'm going to protect you. I'm going to anoint you. I'm going to watch over you. You're going to be king. That's the promise of God. But what had David done? He'd forgotten the promises of God. He says, man, I'm going to perish at the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me. I might as well run. He'd forgotten the promises of God. If you're going to get better and you're going to minister to that spirit of depression that tries to grab hold of you, you're going to have to remember the promises of God regarding salvation, regarding sanctification, regarding the power of God in your life. You've got to remember the promises of God instead of making up the statements where you're counseling yourself. You got it? The third thing, not only are you going to have to turn back to God instead of yourself and inquire of God instead of counseling yourself. And not only you're going to have to do those things and you're going to have to remember the promises of God, but here's a very important thing. You're going to have to wait. That's the most difficult part of all. What David needed to do was simply wait. Have you ever heard the statement of this? I know you've heard the statement. Don't just stand there. Do something. You heard that? That's the wrong advice. You need to mark, that's wrong advice. Here's the advice that you need to hear. When you come to the things of God, if you want to get better, here's what you need to write down. You listen to me now. Don't just do something, stand there. Don't just go do something, stand there. Stand there and wait and see what God is going to do. For see, the problem with David was he didn't stand there, but he had to find something to do. And when he was looking for something to do, he chose the wrong thing. So if you're struggling with depression, there are three things that you got to do. Listen to God, not you. Inquire of God, not your mind. Remember the promises of God that God gives to you, and don't just do something. Stand there and wait. And as you wait, God in His time will do exactly what He promised. We all are going to battle it. We all are going to struggle. It is one of the dominant spirits that the enemy is using in our society this day is depression. It's depression. But God will give us the victory. And we don't want our depression to be a result of our sin, and we don't want to commit sin as a result of depression. We don't want to just do something. We want to wait on God, call on God, claim the promises of God. And if we do, we'll have the victory. Amen?